Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 48.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 48 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Today's sponsor, NagYourRep.com, where you can annoy an anti-gunner, embrace your inner gun nut, and do your part to defend the second by regularly, consistently, and automatically reminding your elected representatives to oppose new gun control laws. The guide is free, the tools are free, so just head over to www.nagyourrep.com, enter your email address, you'll be signed up for the Out of Order Gun Rights email list, and I'll send you your free guide. Today's guest is Scott Irwin. Scott is a psychotherapist, recovering federal agent, and firearms instructor. And now, here's Scott.
Scott Irwin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Scott, you have a company called Texas Top Shots. Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Well, Texas Top Shots is actually my new company. I have another company as well called West Texas Tactical Defense, which has been around since 2011. Primarily with West Texas Tactical Defense, I've been teaching Texas used to be concealed handgun license, now it's licensed to carry classes for a area of West Texas, which is really kind of underserved in that regard. It's a rural area, ranching and farming, and just not a lot of opportunities for people in those particular counties to get the kind of service that I provide to them, which is the handgun training, the skills training, and also the license to carry classes. Texas Top Shots is my newer undertaking, and it is firearms training and residential safety consulting, which is going to be primarily taking place in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And what I have involved with that is the firearms training and residential safety consulting would include also the license to carry classes would be offered, but it would be personal safety and self-defense, in-home safety consulting, which I would provide home evaluation. I would go through the home, find places that look like they could be better lit around the house, weak points of possible entry for an intruder, other safety concerns that the family might want to take note of and address, as well as give them some defense strategies, put them through some role-playing type situations, some scenario-based training within their own home, where a lot of, from what I've seen, there's a lot of this kind of thing that's being done, but usually people go to a gun range or they go to a particular facility to get that kind of training. And what I'm doing is taking this to people's homes, training them in their own environment, which they're more familiar with, give them scenarios, give them possibilities that they would have to solve, work through, and give them the best skill set that they could possibly have to deal with any potential problems that might arise in the home. In addition to that, work with the family on safety, particularly with the kids, teach them gun safety, teach them firearms safety, as well as any kind of shooting skills that they might want. Might also refer them for security systems, advise them on best situations for them in their situation regarding gun safes and those types of things as well. And then also to kind of cap that off, I'm also doing some LEOSA carry permit training for retired officers as well.
Wow, very busy. So I guess it sounds like it's in-home security consulting for...
It's, for lack of a better term, it's basically advising people or consulting them on the best type of arrangement for them in their own personal situation, whatever it is that they want to work on, whatever it is that they feel the need. I can tailor that to their specific requests. But the specialty is basically to point out to them, the areas of their home where they could make some improvements, some safety improvements, and a lot of this does center around, preventing burglaries or intrusions, that kind of thing. But what happens if somebody breaks in their home, maybe they have kids in the house or whatever, what do you do? Do you go after that intruder? Do you take into account where the kids are in the home? What types of weapon or defense tools are you going to use? Some people don't like guns. Some people don't want guns. So we might even consult in an area that would be an alternative to firearms. So these are the kinds of things that would be addressed if somebody hires Texas Top Shots to do that kind of consulting for them.
Excellent. And so I read that you are a psychotherapist, recovering federal agent, and firearms instructor. That's a very interesting mix. How did that all come to be?
Well, I went to school to be a licensed professional counselor, have a master's degree in marriage and family counseling and a master's degree in education. Finished my schooling in 2000. Went into mental health work in the Dallas-Fort Worth area to get that experience and also to get my licensing out of the way. Did some psychotherapy, did some mental health, severe mental illness patients. And then about 2007, I went to work for the Federal Bureau of Prisons in the psychology department there at a local prison here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, federal prison. And while I got on there, I also took advantage of the opportunity to get on their SWAT team, which is in the Bureau of Prisons known as a SORT team, Special Operations Response Team. So I did that for a few years. Really had a good time with that. Really enjoyed that, but it was also some hair-raising experiences as well. Some responding to some prison riots and different kinds of things, and really had to come to terms with my own mortality a couple of times. This is what I signed up for, kind of situation. Did that for a few years until I went to the United States courts as a United States probation officer, which basically is like a parole officer, but it handles all supervision of criminal offenders at the federal level, where I was also a trainer at that point, firearms and officer safety and self-defense trainer for the United States courts for the Northern District of Texas. Did that for a while, basically had my fill of the federal government and the bureaucracy and the politics and everything else. And I after 10 years of federal service, I decided to go ahead and go my own way and got back into some counseling, doing some psychotherapy work, some mental and behavioral health type work, and then really starting to focus on my private business and expanding that for the firearms and training.
Sure. So what inspired you to become a firearms trainer? I mean, did you grow up with firearms, or? The West Texas environment that I mentioned earlier is family environment for me. So I grew up going hunting. I grew up going out to kind of a farming and ranching environment, and was around guns and shooting and some things that way, and just kind of always had an appeal for me. But then I guess I was in college. I started shooting competitive skeet, and really enjoy that. That's probably where my heart is the most, is with skeet and sporting clays and five stand. But and then it was just kind of a natural transition once I got to the Bureau of Prisons to really start to take on some of these additional collateral duties, as they're called, and particularly ones related to firearms. So it was kind of a natural fit for me, and so I took full advantage of that. And you're also working on a new church safety team. Would you tell us a bit about that? So the church I go to here in the Fort Worth area is a pretty large church. It's not by any means the largest. We have some mega churches in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but the church I go to has about 800 to 1,000 on a given Sunday. We have not had any kind of security team in place. And following the recent shooting last November in South Texas at the church down there, our church finally said we need to really do something. And so having my background being a FLETC-trained instructor and trainer, I went ahead and met with some of the leadership at the church and said, this is something that I feel like I could contribute and help put this together and lead this team for our church, and they agreed, and so we've been rolling this out, getting this underway. In fact, this week I've started doing some actual real training with the guys. It took me a while to get a team together. It also took us a while to get some things on paper, some legal framework in place for the church, so that we're doing everything according to the happiness of the lawyers and all. But we've started getting these guys trained, and some of these guys have some incredible backgrounds. Some of these guys are way beyond me in their firearms knowledge, and then some of these guys are kind of new to the situation, but they have the right demeanor and the right mindset, I believe, to really take this on, because we don't want guys that are trigger happy or hotheads or angry. We want people that can stay calm in the face of some kind of trouble that might present itself at our church.
Sure. And when that shooting was in the news a while back, it was brought up that concealed carry isn't allowed in churches. So is there some other aspect of the law that allows you to be armed for your security team, or do you have to do it unarmed? Or
well, in Texas, it's up to the church leadership whether they want to allow people to carry firearms in the churches. And what I've discovered in taking on this project is most of the churches in the area, I think the estimate is about 25% or so, give or take, of the congregation is probably carrying a firearm concealed. And we have been waiting for the governor of Texas had requested that the Attorney General provide some kind of guidance or opinion on what exactly the law states with regard to who can carry in church and when and whatnot, and whether there needs to be signs posted if the church doesn't want people carrying. So I think we're still waiting on our Attorney General Paxton in Texas to come down with that opinion. But the default rule is if the church hasn't said it's okay, then it's probably not okay. So there are probably a lot of churches that are in the dark, or at least in a gray area around the state of Texas, that aren't really sure what to do. And it might be an area of expansion for Texas Top Shots, too, to kind of be able to go to some of these smaller churches and really at a cost that they can afford to kind of give them some guidance on what they can and can't do and what they can expect.
Sure, because there is that sort of that, I guess, dichotomy the right word, where you want to be welcoming because it is a church, and at the same time you need to keep it secure, and those things don't always go well together. Right,
and the number one concern that I've been getting with regard to this church safety team in particular, the church I go to, is people will say to me, well, we don't want a bunch of people with guns all at the same time popping up in church if there's a threat, and then not knowing where the real threat is coming from now, and you have a bunch of people shooting across the church at each other. Yep. So that's definitely some of the chaos that we're trying to get a handle on, and definitely want to put some organization to our church response to any kind of threat. And not only to stop with an active shooter response at our church, but we're also putting together a plan for natural disasters like tornadoes, medical emergencies, fire drills, and these kinds of things, all of which really we've been kind of behind the curve as a church to try to get these things in place for us. And as big as we are, we really needed to have those things a long time ago.
Right. And so what kind of, like, as a psychotherapist, mental health and firearms comes up a lot. Do you have any insight into, as a psychotherapist, into firearms laws and firearm safety?
Well, of course, it's been a lot to think about, and over the last few years, there's been a lot of examples. There have been a lot of examples that have given us a lot of food for thought, and really, in my mind, and as a professional in both firearms and in psychotherapy, whether it's a mental illness or not, you have people who have been left behind by society who feel like the world owes them something. They don't have the coping skills to deal with whatever it is that's hurting them, or whatever rejection they're feeling, so they take it upon themselves to pay back what they feel like they've missed out. And so for that brief moment, they're going to feel like they're in control. They're going to feel like they're in charge, and they're going to play God, or they're going to say, "Look at me now," or they're going to say, "This is my time." And it's twisted and it's messed up. But like I said, whether it's mental illness or not, whatever it is, it's the coping skills aren't there, and the response is inappropriate. And I think that's common to all these guys. They feel like there's some kind of a rejection or some kind of a a moment in their, well, not a moment, but there's some kind of aspect of their life where they can't keep up with society, and they don't fit in, or whatever the case may be. And so this is their payback.
So up here in New Jersey, we're seeing a lot of I guess what they're calling strengthening of gun laws, but we like to say more restrictions. And it almost seems like they've criminalized mental health, to where if you even speak to a psychotherapist, or even talk to a doctor about being depressed, you might lose your gun rights. Do you have any thoughts on how? I mean, we already have that safety measure in place. If you're committed, you lose your gun rights, but where that can be balanced?
You have in most places, and at the federal level as well, where in order for somebody to lose their gun rights, there has to be due process involved. And anything short of that, I think, you're going to run into some constitutional problems, and you're going to have. And I think I remember after Sandy Hook hearing that New York, maybe Connecticut, I don't know about New Jersey or Maryland or some of the other states with more strict gun laws. But I do remember specifically that there was something about New York State having passed a law that any kind of mental health issues or concerns that came up were going to be obstacles to possessing firearms, and it didn't sound like there was a whole lot of due process involved with that. And I think anytime you're going to run against that, you're going to have some constitutional challenges. So just because somebody has a mental health condition, whether it's they're getting Paxil for depression, or they're getting, Klonopin for anxiety, or they're getting Adderall for ADHD, that doesn't make them a threat to society in and of itself. And that's where I think that we have it right in the first place, is to make sure there's some due process involved. But if we need to help people that are in these situations get that due process, maybe we can look at ways of getting them faster due process, I guess, so to speak. You got to be careful when you run up against rights versus public safety. There's a balance there, and we got to make sure we get it right.
Absolutely. And I was speaking to Dr. Adine the other day, Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. There's a tendency for, what we observe anyway, is there's a tendency for the medical community to be anti-gun. Have you experienced that in your training and your profession?
I think I found a lot of that working for the federal government, and I found that in the healthcare community too. I think healthcare providers tend to be of a help. A lot of them. No, this isn't across the board, but they tend to be of a nurturing type nature, and they want to heal. And I think they see because they're not part of the firearms community. They're, if you want to, for lack of a better phrase, but they don't understand that world. They don't understand firearms. They don't have any desire to. They just see them as a problem, or they see them as a danger, and they don't even really understand the reason why we have that right to begin with. And so to a lot of people who choose not to even understand that side of the equation, there is a lot of animosity towards firearms. There is a lot of looking down their nose in some cases, and it's not always the case. And I think the flip side of that is nurses tend to be more hands-on type people, and so you have a lot of nurses who are kind of involved in that community, or they are shooters. They are hands-on type people, because it is not just a desk job. Being particularly a hospital nurse or an ER nurse, they tend to be more kind of hands-on people. And to me, it seems like some of those more hands-on people seem to be more amenable to firearms and shooting sports and those kinds of things, hunting. I'm not saying a lot of nurses hunt, but I think that there's going to be a little bit more of an appreciation for that kind of hands-on activity, because they're all hands-on people themselves in a lot of ways. I think you're right, though. I think that especially with the higher the education level, for some reason, I think there's some kind of elitist attitude or mentality that can creep in some cases. And there's a lot of doctors too, though, that pay big money to go on expensive hunts and things around the country, around the world. So it's like any industry. I think you're going to have both sides of the argument, maybe more so on the anti-gun side, just because it's a helping profession, and they see that as kind of a threat or a danger.
Okay, great. And so I always ask my guests if there are any books they recommend that gun owners read, whether liberty or gun related or anything come to mind.
Well, I don't think a lot of gun owners, particularly the people I see in my handgun licensing classes, do enough to train themselves. And so I think any kind of skills development type of book, Fighting with a 1911 by Tiger McKee or something like that would be good, just hands-on training. Because what I've found in a lot of my gun licensing classes is these people, they want to get their license, they want to get it over with, and they don't want any additional training. And for whatever reason, if they don't have time, it's a financial burden for them or whatever the case may be. I still think, they don't know what they don't know, and the more training they can get. And I wouldn't mandate it as something that they would have to do, but I would sure highly encourage it, because the more people know, the better off they're going to be. And so if they could get some kind of training books or books that kind of help them get a better understanding of what they're getting themselves into, particularly for the beginners or the novice people.
Great. Thank you. And where can people find you online?
So my Texas Top Shots website is not operational at the moment, but my West Texas Tactical Defense, it's www.westtxtd.com. That's my West Texas Tactical Defense website. I have a class coming up in Colorado, Texas on July 28th for license to carry. We offer a beginner or a initial marksmanship class as well that we'd love to have people join, because I think the more people can train, the better off they're going to be. But westtxtd.com would be the website for West Texas Tactical Defense. You can also find me on Facebook, and I do have a West Texas Tactical Defense Facebook page as well as a Texas Top Shots.
Oh, okay, great. I will link to all three of those on the show notes page. And Scott, I thank you very much for being on the show. Any parting words for our listeners?
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for what you're doing. Good luck with New Jersey.
Thank you.
and I would encourage everybody, if you're new to firearms, if you are just now getting your first guns or whatever the case may be, get that training. Training is so important, and the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, and the better off you're going to be. You just can't say enough for it.
Well, I thank you very much for coming on, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Today's show notes page, outoforderjameskalita.com/Scott, and you'll find links to West Tactical Defense, Scott's other websites, the books he mentioned. Of course, you'll also find links to our sponsors, nagyourrep.com, and Liberty Classroom, where you get the history and economics lessons they didn't teach you in high school, and of course Liberty Maniacs, where you get those really cool shirts. So head over to outoforderjameskalita.com/Scott, and we'll see you next time.